Hello and welcome to the second part of today's Ukraine War Update Extra video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce, here at ATP Geopolitics. I split it into two, it was too long, so here's the second part, and we'll get on to the first thing that I'm going to talk about, which is next. Moving on to something that we haven't talked about an awful lot, actually, the Russian Navy. This is just really to say that the Russian Navy in the Black Sea is just fairly ineffective. It's not doing a lot. So the war in the Black Sea does not get much coverage, but it is noteworthy to see this picture from Covert Shores about how Russia's naval war effort has deteriorated from absolute dominance near Odessa in March 2022 to being bottled up in harbours and, of course, in Moskva being sunk. So here you had, at the time, all these big fleets, 10 Russian Navy ships near Odessa in Ukraine, March the 30th, 2022. Now, where are these ships? February 9th, 2023, stuck in a Russian port. In fact, not even in Sevastopol in Crimea. So this is in Novorossiysk. Let's go and find that on the map for you. So let's go back down to the Black Sea. So the Russians have pulled out their naval fleet from Sevastopol because it was being hit by drones and they were worried about. And then the sea drones came and took out a few ships. We're not quite sure exactly what the damage done was. So they moved their ships to this port here on mainland Russia, but that port I think is not quite deep enough. It's not as useful as Sevastopol. I don't know whether it can accommodate submarines as easily or whether it's some of the larger boats or something. It's just not as decent a port as Sevastopol. But that's where they're holed up, and that and the Russians are unable to use their fleet effectively. Yeah, I just think that's an interesting thing to remember because we don't really talk about the Navy too much, and precisely because it does virtually nothing apart from pop out into the sea to fire off cruise missiles, as it has done today, and then pop back. And that's basically what they do. They're glorified rocket launchers. Shashank Joshi here, the defense correspondent for The Economist, says, "We knew the US was giving tactical intelligence to Ukraine, including for high-value targets in the Moskva." The post, so this is the claim. I just wanted to talk about this again. This is a claim in the Washington Post that the US are providing real-time intelligence for HIMARS, and HIMARS don't really operate without the American intelligence and kind of say so, if you like. So before I go to the Washington Post piece, I just want to point you towards this with Shashank Joshi saying, it's worth revisiting this Daily Telegraph piece from last year, quotes from which are, "As far as military intelligence is concerned, Britain and US have provided almost everything from information to equipment. General Skibitsky gave no specific details of the support Britain is providing, but said the assistance was, quote, minute-to-minute, real-time information of all kinds." And asked how the US provided HIMARS multiple launch rocket systems have so precisely targeted Russian fuel and ammunition depots as well as battlefield headquarters in eastern Ukraine, General Skibitsky said, quote, "In this case in particular, we use real-time information. US officials are not providing direct targeting information, which would potentially undermine their case for not being direct participants in the war," General Skibitsky said. Not sure about that. However, remember this is from last year. However, he suggested there was a level of consultation between intelligence officials of both countries prior to launching missiles that would allow Washington to stop any potential attacks if they were unhappy with the intended target. Quote, "I can't tell you whether we are directly tasking British and American satellites, but we have very good satellite imagery," he told the Telegraph. "We have very good cooperation with our partners in the UK in this field." So this article has quite a lot of interest in here. It starts, Ukrainian officials say they require, the article is Ukraine's rocket campaign reliant on US precision targeting, officials say. Ukrainian officials say they require coordinates provided or confirmed by the US and its allies for the vast majority of strikes using its advanced US provided rocket systems, a previously undisclosed practice that reveals a deeper and more operationally active role for the Pentagon in the war. One senior Ukrainian official said the Ukrainian forces almost never launched the advanced weapons without specific coordinates provided by US military personnel from a base elsewhere in Europe. Ukrainian officials say this process should give Washington confidence about providing Kyiv with longer range weapons. In other words, I think why this is kind of why they're happy for this to get out is that, look, very publicly, you, everyone now knows that you're giving us the coordinates, and we don't fire these rockets unless we get your say so. So if one of the reasons you're not giving us ATACMS is because we might fire it into Russia, look at what we're doing already. We are only using these with your say so. So if you give us ATACMS, that's brilliant, but we'll only use them with your say so. And it's kind of like, you know, let's go on the evidence we have of how we're keeping to what we've agreed upon, but also how you are effectively dictating in some sense or facilitating our targeting anyway. Um, a senior US official who, like others, spoke on the condition of anonymity because of the sensitivity of the issue, acknowledged the key American role in the campaign and said that the targeting assistance served to ensure accuracy and conserve limited stores of ammunition for maximum effectiveness. The official said that Ukraine does not seek approval from the United States on what to strike and routinely targets Russian forces on their own with other weapons. The US provides coordinates and precise targeting information solely in an advisory role, the official said. I think there's a bit, somewhat of a grey area here. I would imagine it's done very closely with the Americans here. Quote, we have long acknowledged that we share intelligence with Ukraine to assist them in defending their country against Russian aggression, and we have optimized over time how we share information to be able to support their requests and their targeting processes at improved speed and scale, Brigadier General Patrick Ryder, Pentagon spokesman, said in the statement. Quote, the Ukrainians are responsible for finding targets, prioritizing them, and then ultimately deciding which ones to engage. The US does not approve targets, nor are we involved in the selection of engagement of targets. The senior Ukrainian official described the targeting process generally. Ukrainian military personnel identify targets they want to hit and in which location, and that information is then sent up to senior commanders, who then relay the request to US partners for more accurate coordinates. The Americans do not always provide the requested coordinates, the official said, in which case the Ukrainian troops do not fire. So here the Americans said the US does not approve targets, nor are we involved in the selection of engagement targets, is somewhat incorrect. It appears that they do approve them by vetoing ones that they don't approve of. And then the Ukrainians can't fire because they don't have the coordinates. It says towards the end of the article, the head of the Ukrainian military's missile forces and artillery training, Major General Andriy Malinovsky, told the Washington Post in an interview in October, so this is going back to last year, that Ukraine's Western allies had confirmed coordinates for targets ahead of the Kharkiv offensive. The partners had worked out a process, he said, with Ukraine receiving precise coordinates to ensure they wouldn't miss their mark with multiple launch rocket artillery systems as the rapid counteroffensive caught Russian forces unprepared. The targeting information also provided a workaround for when Russian signal jamming prevented aerial drone reconnaissance on the battlefield, Malinovsky said. Quote, according to our maps and software, a point will have one set of coordinates, Malinovsky said. But when we give this target to partners for analysis, the coordinates are different. Why? Because the Americans and NATO countries have access to military satellites. We're all basically always online, he added. They immediately get us the coordinates and we then fire the MLRS right away. A third Ukrainian official confirmed that targeting all goes through an American installation on NATO soil and described the process as very fast. The Washington Post is withholding the name of the base at the request of the US officials who cited security concerns. I have long said that this is a proxy war. People keep calling me out on that. But I refer you to my article that I've written on exactly that. Let's go and find that for you. So on Only Sky, yes, it is a proxy war, and it's one we must win. I don't have a problem with calling it a proxy war. It's just what it is. When America and the allies of Ukraine, the UK, everyone involved in this, is providing everything but troops on the ground. Like literally, as far as I can work out, everything is being provided: weapons, ammunition, money, uh, military intelligence, real time intelligence, military advice and strategizing. Um, Everything is being provided for the Ukrainians, apart from physical people to send onto the front lines. We are effectively at war with Russia in this case. We as allies are doing an awful lot of the legwork, if not the actual, soldier led legwork. I mean, that's those are the people who die, and they are the sacrifice. But but everything else is being provided to some degree by allies to Ukraine. You can disagree with me however you like, but I define sort of proxy war, I think, here, and talk about what the evidence is that we are indeed engaged in one. Okay, moving on to talk about kamikaze drones, one-way drones, whatever you want to call them. You're actually starting to see them a lot more on the battlefield in Ukrainian hands, and several different types. So this is a Seneca aerial reconnaissance unit of the Ukrainian 93rd Mechanized Brigade, uses a Switchblade 300 kamikaze drone on enemy units in the trenches. I suspect the contract of these guys ended. So this is a Switchblade 300 going in, targeting uh, basically individuals really in their trenches, and it goes in and then hits those people. You don't see anything. It's not inappropriate in that respect. Of course, it is probably the eventual death or certain injury of these two. And Switchblade 300s are really only designed to take out one or two people max. They are small munitions on lightweight drones that are easy to carry around. You fire them up from a kind of like a mortar, like uh, a mortar piece of equipment. You fire it up, the wings come out, you then fly it onto its target, circle around, find your target, hit it. But it isn't a very big piece of explosive. The Switchblade 600 are the bigger ones that can more likely take out vehicles, or maybe make them inoperable to some degree. But then you get other ones like this. So I'm just going to talk you through this in a second. This is the State Border Guard Service of Ukraine attacks a group of Russian infantry near Kherson with a Polish Warmate loitering munition. Now, the Warmate launch is shown here. So basically, it fires off from a sort of ground. I don't know whether it's a catapult thing, and then it took on this building. But the actual story of this build, oh, here it is. There, the video of it taking off, and then flies into that building. Then the building ends up, being on fire and burning, and then there's another shot of that. I don't know whether that burning building looks much more catastrophic than what it is there. I wonder if that's two separate things. It certainly looks like the same place, though. Interesting. Hmm. I don't know. Anyway, the story is that apparently, where is it? Oh, I don't have it. Apparently, there were people in this building there, and that building itself was attacked. So they all run out and run into this building. There's like 8 soldiers, I think. They run to a second building, and it's that second building that they then attack with a kamikaze drone. So it's like trying to escape from one thing, and then they run into another. But yeah, so that it's interesting that kamikaze drones seem to be a little bit more prevalent than they previously have been for the Ukrainian forces. So this is a fascinating article sent to me by one of you guys. I really appreciate that. This is opinion. A mercenary air force for Ukraine. It's not as far fetched as it sounds. This is written by a retired colonel from the U.S. Air Force, Jeffrey Fisher, for the Kiev Post. The idea is that trying to provide Ukraine with jets at the moment is really problematic. So these suggestions, unfortunately, it says, share a common suite of problems: aircraft availability, long lead training programs, and substantial funding. As efforts to address these challenges percolate, a small group is presenting a unique option. While unprecedented and bold, the idea of contracting a private air force to Ukraine is gaining traction. In 2018, for example, Slovakia announced a contract to buy F-16s. They will receive their first aircraft in 2024 if it's not delayed again. So, at the best case scenario, they've ordered a plane, they get it in 6 years later. Ukraine needs planes right now. That's really quite difficult. But then, the second problem is aircraft training and how long that takes to get their Ukrainian pilots up to the required training, and that can often take 9 to 12 months. The third challenge is the cost of this. So the cost of procuring these jets from abroad or from wherever is a huge cost. So what's the option here then? Well, it's interesting. In 2019, the article says the US Department of Defense awarded a substantial contract to outsource its aggressor air training squadrons. 7 companies, Raven, formerly Air USA, Airborne Tactical Advantage Company, ATAC, Blue Air Training, Coastal Defense, Draken International Tactical Air Support, and Top Aces, were identified. These companies purchased varying fleets of aircraft, hired pilots and maintainers, as well as other support functions. Today, these companies provide exceptional training for US military pilots, successfully saving the DoD funds. Interestingly, a DoD cost savings effort has created a secondary effect. These US companies, as part of the military industrial complex, possess substantial air power beyond merely training. Some of the leadership within these companies are already contemplating if and how they could meet Ukraine's requirement for air power. Such a lease option addresses. So if they're sorry, I'm missing out a paragraph here, but such a lease option addresses or mitigates the aforementioned 3 challenges. The companies under lease would provide their own aircraft, eliminating the need to find jets. Second, the company would provide its own qualified aircrew, and well qualified at that. There'd be no training requirement. Lastly, the cost is manageable and set by contract. There would be no massive front-end funding to pay for aircraft, and given the privatized nature, these companies have crafted efficiencies to keep operational costs manageable. According to a pilot from one of the 7 companies, talks about the very concept began a while ago on Capitol Hill. Interestingly, some of those discussions have progressed to the point of pricing. That pilot, who for security reasons must remain unidentified, said his CEO had surfaced the idea of deploying roughly a squadron of capability within 60 to 90 days at a cost that is around $30,000 per flight hour, a reasonable operating cost for a fighter employment. While the 7 companies house different fleets, 2 companies stand out. Top Aces and Draken have built fleets that could provide a substantial capability given their recent procurement of F-16 Falcons. Top Aces recently won a $175 million defense contract to provide F-16 aggressor training to the US Air Force after procuring 29 ex-Israeli F-16s. Similarly, Draken's former CEO, Joe Ford, announced the purchase of 12 ex-Norwegian F-16s, which his company also intends to employ for aggressor training to the US Department of Defense. The F-16 is arguably the most advanced aircraft in a private fleet. It is also an aircraft with strong logistics support and a substantial pool of talent globally. A leased air force to Ukraine, however, is likely to be an attractive option to many in DC. The concept allows for a rapid, well-trained and cost-effective air force to confront Russia in the skies over Ukraine. More importantly, it provides a degree of separation from direct US military involvement, and it's steps shorter is steps shorter than the US entering the war. Remember, I'm missing out paragraphs and whatnot here. So there's a bit of a legal dilemma, is there? So traditional military personnel are privileged, affording them prisoner of war status if captured. Unprivileged personnel, when captured, become criminal prisoners and subject to civilian law in that nation. Private contracted pilots would likely be deemed unprivileged. In fact, we've heard about this before, where Aiden Aslin, so a UK soldier who's actually been in Ukraine had been in Ukraine for a number of years, was part of their armed forces, but the Russians deemed him a mercenary, even though he wasn't, and sentenced him to death. So these pilots could be sentenced to death, would almost certainly be. According to the Geneva Center for the Democratic Control of Armed Forces, there are over 150 private military companies or private military and security companies globally, and some US companies on that list. To date, the US government has spoken out against PMCs in Ukraine. Additionally, it has advised US citizens to not join the fight, but has taken no action beyond A statement. Reports suggest over 350 US defense contractors were killed in Iraq and Afghanistan, with professions ranging from truck driver to fireman and others. In other words, this is something that the US does in other ways when they're directly involved. The difference here being that the US is not supposedly directly involved, except they kind of are, as I've talked about already. So there's a lot of grey areas. Interestingly, in World War One, dozens of private American pilots flew for the French military in the famed Lafayette Escadrille. Um, yeah, so there is some kind of um, previous for this. Really, really interesting. And I have to say, it's not an inconceivable idea. I don't think it'll happen, to be honest. But as the article says, it's not as far fetched as it sounds. It is an interesting way around the problem of getting jets to Ukraine. Finally, just to confirm that Yevgeny Prigozhin, the founder of the Wagner private military company, talking about mercenaries, has announced that the recruitment of convicts to the recognized criminal private military company has now completely stopped. He never specified what caused such a decision. And as I said earlier today, could that be that the Russian army is now doing that themselves, according to some? Is it because he's just not getting enough from the prisons and people aren't wanting to? Is it because he's being nudged out of the fronts where the Wagner PMC has been active, like Bakhmut? You're starting to see the regular Russian military there and DNR there as well. So has he lost favor with the powers that be, and are we starting to see Wagner retreat from this conflict and cease to be a going concern? I don't know. We shall see. Thank you for tuning in and watching this. I really appreciate that. Thanks for all your support. Please like, subscribe, and share. Hit the bell, press things, do whatever. And just, thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Over 7,000 subscribers, so I'm told now. That's fantastic. I mean, that's an arbitrary number. I prefer the number 6,847 personally, but whatever floats your boat. Really appreciate all the support that you do give me, and as I keep saying, the comments in the threads below, they are very, very engaging. And in fact, they engage me far too long. I have a life to lead, don't you know, or something. No, evidently not. Anyway, thank you. Take care, and I'll speak to you tomorrow.